Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Alex. Yeah, it's just me today. Shawn is out of town this week, and I'm taking over the reins for the show just for this week, so don't worry. Our great founder and main host will be back next week. But for the meantime, I have plenty to talk about tonight. We got Cubs and White Sox action as the deadline approaches. We're also going to talk some Bears because training camp is just about to start. The players are reporting, and Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are speaking to the media. And maybe a little bit of Blackhawks and Bulls. We'll try to get to every team. But before we do, I would like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of your Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. Now, the season may be long over, but hockey season's going to be here before you know it. So be sure to pick up a hat, shirt, jersey, and some tickets. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Okay, so probably the most relevant things right now are baseball and Bears, and I'm probably going to get to the Cubs last, so I'm going to start with some White Sox talk here as we approach this deadline. Shawn and I last week talked a lot about the White Sox and how we probably don't think they're going to do much at the deadline, and I still think that's probably going to be the case here. I mean, there's no way they're going to be buying, and they don't have much in terms of veteran assets to sell. But we did bring up Alex Colomé, and we have brought up John Jay. Those are really two guys I think that could be easily dealt. Now, last week we were kind of talking about Alex Colomé, saying he's probably not going to bring you that big haul that Aroldis Chapman or Andrew Miller did to the Indians and the Cubs in 2016. Just kind of because that even though he's gotten the job done, it's not like he's striking guys out left and right and throwing 99, 100 miles an hour. I mean, he's been very good. He's getting a lot of contact outs, not missing as many bats. But I mean, nevertheless, he's going to probably be on the radar for a number of contending teams, whether he's going to be a closer or bullpen depth, but he'll probably generate some interest. We also talked about Jose Abreu, and I wanted to get to him again because last week we said, he's probably not going to be dealt. The White Sox value him too much as being a veteran presence, and I still think that's the case. The reason I wanted to talk about him was, look, let's just cut to the chase really quickly. The White Sox have had a brutal start to the second half. They got swept by the Oakland A's. You got swept by the Kansas City Royals, which was really a shock. We thought, okay, they got swept by the A's. That was a good team. The Royals are terrible. Really terrible. They have Whit Merrifield, Hunter Dozier, and I mean, Jorge Soler is going to hit over 30 home runs, and yeah, that's about it. So we thought, okay, that's going to right the ship, and that was not the case. They got swept, and the pitching looked awful for the Sox. The defense looked awful for the Sox, and they didn't really hit much. And when they did hit, it was kind of too little too late in a number of those games. And then they did win the series against Tampa Bay, and they lost today 4-2. Dylan Cease, while looking very good at times, I mean, Dylan Cease is going to be really good, and we'll get back to him in a minute, but you lost today, and you've only won 2 games since the All-Star break, which really stinks. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you were never going to be buyers. You were probably not going to be in the thick of a playoff race. There's just a lot of teams ahead of you. You're still rebuilding. There's still some developing to do. They still have to plug some holes with legitimate guys. But why I wanted to get into Jose Abreu was because after the sweep in Kansas City, he made some comments where he basically said, look, we're trying to do our best, but we're waiting for the front office to provide us with the assets we need to succeed. I mean, it kind of sounded like he was taking a little bit of a shot at the front office and kind of how the team has been playing. Look, Jose Abreu has given the White Sox all he has given since he got here in 2014. So a number of years, he has given you all-star season after all-star season. The guy can hit with power, driving runs. He's been there for you this whole time. And the whole time, he's basically been surrounded by garbage. He has not played on one postseason White Sox team. He has not played on one winning White Sox team. And I mean winning, I'm just talking about 500 or better. His entire tenure as being on the Chicago White Sox has been nothing but losing seasons. And one may say, how can he be a proven leader if he's never been on a winning team? You look at the way the young players are responding to his presence, and they've made comments on it. I think that's important. He's clearly a positive presence for this team. He was originally brought in to hope to bring in a World Series with the core they somewhat had. They didn't have much. I mean, they brought him in the last year of Paul Konerko, but, his career was over. But you had Chris Sale, you had Jose Quintana, and then you tried to build around him with Adam Eaton and Todd Frazier, and it wasn't nearly enough. And he never got the team around him. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is Jose Abreu's given you everything, and the fact that the Sox have not been winning since he's been here has never been his fault. It never has. If anything, he's made your team better, even better than what it should have been because he's a good player, if that makes any sense. I don't blame him if he has a lot of frustration. He clearly loves being with this franchise. He wants to give this franchise a legitimate chance at winning. He wants to be part of that. And the fact that he's yet to see it since being here since 2014, heck, I'd be frustrated too. And I'm sure he understands that they are going through a rebuilding process. But you have Luis Robert in the minors going on a tear that you couldn't even imagine. His numbers are ridiculous. Since being promoted to AAA, he hasn't slowed down one bit. People are waiting for him. There's a number of guys in the farm that are waiting to come up. But that's not even the extent of it. You look at the moves the White Sox have made, and you got to understand, as I'm sure most White Sox fans do, that you're going to plug holes with guys that maybe are just there to be a veteran presence, maybe there to be a sign and trade. It's just something adequate. I think where a lot of his frustration may come in is the fact that Rick Hahn, and again, I'm not saying this is any indication of him being overly terrible or that this rebuild's going to be a failure, because I think the exact opposite, but I see what the White Sox put out there. And I sometimes feel like they dig the very bottom of the dumpster. You could have had a Dallas Keuchel, who may not have been top of his game, but he still would have been a name with a resume that could still maybe give you something and give your team a sense that they are looking to the future sooner than you think. But you're bringing in guys like Manny Banuelos and Ross Detweiler, who I didn't even know was still playing. You bring in Dylan Covey time after time. Irvin Santana, who's long washed up. I mean, the James Shields trade was before the rebuild, so that's a whole other story. But you get what I'm saying. You're digging at the bottom of the dumpster to plug in holes. And I feel like even though you're in a rebuild, you can go out and you could do better. I didn't expect Yonder Alonso to be as bad as he was. I thought that was going to be a pretty decent pickup for the White Sox. I mean, the guy was an all-star not too long ago. He was a 20-plus home run hitter not too long ago. I mean, that just didn't work out. I thought it was going to be better, and I know it was made with the intent of trying to get Manny Machado here. But that's really the best you can do. And the whole Manny Machado thing is a whole story on its own. We talked about that so many times. I'm tired of hearing about it. White Sox fans are tired of hearing about it. But you get my point. Is that I just think that the White Sox could try and maybe to fill your holes with something a bit more adequate than Manny Benuelos, Irvin Santana's rotting corpse, Ross Detweiler's rotting corpse. I just think you could do better than that. There are still a lot of positive things, though, going on with the White Sox beside the struggles. I mean, Yohan Moncada continues to rake. I mentioned Luis Robert in the minors. You have Dylan Cease. I want to get into him. I know the overall numbers do not look pretty, but just sit down and rewatch today's game against the Rays and look at his stuff. 97 miles an hour with movement. Curveball with movement. When it's located in the zone, it's a beautiful thing. The stuff is there. This is just part of the growing pains. Everyone knew it was going to be there. It's hard for a young pitcher to come up and immediately succeed. Dylan Cease has a lot of work to do, but man, the promise is there, so be happy about that. And Lucas Giolito yesterday, he rebounded and looked just fine. So I don't think there's any real reason to worry there. It's frustrating for Sox fans, I'm sure, not having seen a winner in a while, to keep watching a rebuilding team, but just, you got a lot of promise there. And it was a really tough break to see Eloy Jimenez get hurt in Kansas City. Another thing that went wrong in that series. But you just hope that he could come back fully healthy soon. But at the end of the day, you want to do everything you can to make sure he is fully healthy. Don't rush him. And I'm sure the White Sox are losing Tim Anderson, because Tim Anderson has been a big source of energy for that team. And I think there's no doubt that they are far, far, far better when Tim Anderson is playing on that team in that lineup. So I guess my advice as a Cubs fan who watched a rebuild is hang in there, but also don't be afraid to let out some frustration, because you know what? Letting out frustration is just part of being a sports fan, and it's understandable to do so. So the White Sox will return home for quite some time, and maybe that'll help them out. Being back in Chicago, home stadium, you're back sleeping in your own bed, and you're familiar with your surroundings, and you have your fans behind you. That could hopefully turn some things around, and you start to play a little better, and you hope that your guys who are hurt get healthy, and you just keep on moving. Keep on developing. We'll see what the trade deadline brings. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be much, but hang in there. So, pretty much everything I've said is all my feelings I have on the White Sox right now. So, let's move on to Bears camp. The Chicago Bears will report to Bourbonnais on Thursday and hit the field Friday for their first camp practice. So, people are starting to come in and report. The official report day is Thursday. I think everyone is very excited to see this team this year. I think the energy surrounding this Bears camp is going to be as high as it's been in a very, very long time for obvious reasons. But we had Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy talking to the press today in Decatur. Now, most of what you heard is kind of stuff you'd expect. There wasn't really anything groundbreaking or any huge news. He said everything is on the table to get a kicker. I think that was pretty obvious for a while. And speaking of kicker, Robbie Gould, who sang the stretch at Wrigley Field today, signed an extension with the 49ers. So that dream that was probably never going to happen is officially dead. I think it's been officially dead for a while. I'm sure he would have liked to come back, but I think his strategy was trying to get a nice big paycheck here from the 49ers. So, yeah, that's not going to be an option, but unless there's some trade, but I really don't see that happening. Right now, you have Elliott Fry and Eddie Pinheiro. Yeah, I don't know. I still think they need to bring in Matt Bryan. At least bring him in and see what he can do. He's still a free agent. I know he's old, but he has been a reliable kicker for a number of years. You try him, maybe you look at a few other guys, but I mean, you got to find something. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous that this roster is full of talent top to bottom. You're just missing a kicker. And if Cody Parkey was any good last year, we wouldn't be in this position, and maybe we would be celebrating something a little more than just the division title and one playoff game. But again, that's a thing of the past. But this is going to be something that has to be resolved. And you don't need some superstar leg. You just need someone that could get the job done. And Cody Parkey was not that, obviously. You need just someone that can make the kicks you're supposed to make. And hopefully they can find that sooner than later, because it's kind of become a circus, as we've said on this show. Matt Nagy is clearly frustrated by it, as he should be. Maybe Nagy and Pace should have done more last year to address that position when Cody Parkey was struggling, but they kept riding with him, and, well, it ultimately cost him. So moving forward, they're going to really have to find the right guy here. Really, the only surprising news that I saw was Clinton-Dix will be on the PUP list due to a sprained knee. He suffered it in mandatory minicamp. It doesn't sound serious. It sounds like he's going to be back pretty soon afterwards. But, yeah, that's not something you want to see. Luckily, it's just a sprain. There's no tear. There's no major injury that we know of. We would like to see Clinton-Dix ready for opening day, and it sounds like there's really no concern about that. So that was really the only big news that I heard. Sounds like Trey Burton and Anthony Miller will be fine and ready to go. So, a pretty healthy camp. A very, very healthy camp. Clinton-Dix seems like the only concern right now, which is good. Obviously, it's just camp. Injuries will happen as time goes on. But we're pretty lucky that there weren't any further injuries than there are, because there was some concern about Trey Burton. There was some concern about Anthony Miller, but that all sounds good. And then he hinted at a possible extension of Cody Whitehair. He mentioned that Cody Whitehair is an important part of our culture. We will keep things in-house in regards to a new contract. So yeah, Cody Whitehair, who's been very efficient for the Bears in his career, might be seeing him for a while. Doesn't sound like there's any talks of how much it will be or when it's going to happen or whatever, but Ryan Pace is very big on Cody Whitehair, as he should be. And yeah, don't be surprised if we see an extension soon. The last thing I wanted to address that Ryan Pace talked about was Leonard Floyd. We drafted him a few years ago, and we've seen the potential. We've seen him make some big plays. We've seen him get injured. We've seen him kind of disappear. We haven't seen the first-round pick Leonard Floyd that we'd hoped, but Ryan Pace is pretty adamant on him that he's added more to his game, that he's going to be breaking out this season. And, I mean, look, I've been waiting for Leonard Floyd to break out a number of seasons. He's only been here a few years, but, you know, we thought by now he'd be in a little bit of a better place. And again, part of that is due to injury. But Ryan Pace says he expects a big year from him, and I certainly hope we do see that from him. I don't know if we will or will not. I was very high on him last year, and I'm still not giving up on him, but, you know, it's like, all right, when are we going to see it? When are we going to see that full great season from Leonard Floyd? He's got a great core of guys around him, so obviously that's going to help him out, but I'm ready for him to break out this season. If he's fully healthy and he takes the step forward, playing in Chuck Pagano's defensive scheme, I think you could see some good things from him, so fingers crossed there. The one thing I'm really excited to watch this Bears camp is to see how Montgomery meshes with this team. Because this kid, I think, has a great skill set. He is exactly what the Bears need. He's a guy that can run. He's a guy that is agile. He's a guy that can catch the ball, versatile. I have been a Jordan Howard defender for a while now, but you know what? It's probably best in the end that they made the move that they did, and they were able to implement a guy like Montgomery from the draft onto this team. We haven't seen him yet, but if you watch his tape and you watch his raw abilities, I think the Bears are going to be in for something special. He is very, very good at slipping past guys. The footwork looks great from what I've seen. So be excited about that. If he works out the way we expect him to, then that running back core of Montgomery and Cohen, oh, that's going to be good. You're going to see both of them, dodging guys and sprinting past guys and going out for catches. I mean, you're going to see them doing it all. Having two versatile, talented guys like Tariq Cohen and Dave Montgomery is going to be really, really good for Matt Nagy's offense. And I'm sure Matt Nagy is just as excited as anyone to use him. And speaking of Matt Nagy and offense, Ryan Pace also added that he feels like Trubisky is going to take the next step forward, or basically he implied it. He basically was talking about how Trubisky in his second year in Matt Nagy's offense, after getting that first full year of experience, will help him. Trubisky will have a full weapon set around him. He will have his versatile running backs. He's got a core of very good receivers. The line, if healthy, should hold up decently, at least enough for him. He's got a lot of great athleticism in the pocket, so he's able to escape pressure, which is nice to have, even when the line doesn't always perform at its top. But hey, I think a fully healthy Bears line is adequate enough for him to work well. And just having experience in your coach's system will help you a lot. I mean, you got to remember, Mitch Trubisky in 1 year went from John freaking Fox to Matt Nagy. That's a huge transition, because in his rookie year, it was, hand the ball off to Jordan Howard, or you'd throw maybe 7 times a game. Now he has a full year of, hey, I got to throw this ball and mix up everything nicely because I actually have people to throw to, and my coach is having me throw the ball. I mean, no other way to put it. This year, one of the biggest stories, obviously, it's going to be them trying to contend for a Super Bowl, but I think if you look at the team from a personnel standpoint, one of the biggest stories is Mitch Trubisky going to take that next step? I mean, he is the most important player on the offense. Obviously, Khalil Mack is probably the most exciting player on the team, and the defense is going to win you a lot of games. But is Mitch Trubisky going to take that next step? That's going to be the biggest story and the biggest question asked as the season goes along. Camp is not always the best way to evaluate a number of players, but I think if you just see everybody healthy and you see how the rookies are meshing with their teammates, that could give you a good idea of what they could bring to the table. And I think it gives players a good idea of what the coaches are going to bring for them. Obviously, this new defensive coordinator in Chuck Pagano is going to try to get acquainted with his team, his personnel, and they're going to try to get used to each other's schemes because a lot of them have been playing for Vic Fangio for a number of years, or at least a year. So this is the time for Chuck Pagano to implement his system and for his players to get used to his system and everyone be on the same page. Now, obviously, it's going to take more than just one training camp for everyone to just be, oh, okay, we're good. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some time, but that's where you got to start. Not much else player-wise. We'll have a lot more to talk about in coming weeks as they actually start camp activities in Bourbonnais. But I would like to mention again that this press conference that Nagy and Pace held came from Decatur, where the Bears started as the Decatur Staleys way back when. Obviously, the Chicago Tribune has been doing that 100 Bear thing where they list the 100 Bears, one each day until opening day. So there's a lot of cool things going on with Chicago and the 100th anniversary of the NFL and the Bears. Obviously, Bears-Packers opening the season, very fitting. I know they said Chance the Rapper is going to be involved with something there, probably the entertainment or whatever. I don't really know too much about that, but it's going to be a big event, and it was cool that they were in Decatur today. I really don't know what Decatur is like. I've never been there, honestly. I have no idea even what's in Decatur. I just know Decatur because of the Bears, because of the Decatur Staleys. But still pretty cool. I saw a picture of the sign that says original home of the Chicago Bears. I should say the Decatur welcoming sign to be specifically, which is cool. I didn't know that was there. So expect more fun things for the 100th anniversary and expect a lot more Bears news as the following weeks come. We'll have all of that right here on Swerski Sports. We'll talk plenty about that. Okay, so we're going to switch gears again here a little bit, and we're going to talk a little Blackhawks. I know there may not be a ton going on as it's the middle of the offseason, but the Blackhawks did make another trade, and it was a trade that a lot of people anticipated, and that was Artem Anisimov being traded to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for center Zach Smith. Now, Smith carries a cap hit of $3.25 million through the 2020-2021 season, so they are saving money with trading away Anisimov, and I mean that was pretty much going to be the whole point, was trading him away, getting his salary off the books. And Artem Anisimov had some very good seasons with the Hawks. He was a very good piece on the team, but he kind of was starting to fade away. The numbers weren't as good. He's getting older, and he just didn't really fit on the team anymore. The Blackhawks are restocking with centers. Artem Anisimov just didn't have a part on this team, and he could go to Ottawa and put up some better numbers again. I mean, I know that team isn't really good at all. They're pretty terrible, but I think being a primary piece on that team, a primary veteran piece on that team, he could maybe put up some better numbers again if he's fully healthy. He'll have maybe a more important role there as they try to rebuild. So thank you, Artem Anisimov, for what you did. This was a trade that probably needed to be made. I shouldn't say probably. It should have been made, and it was. Some of that money that you saved, maybe extending Perlini, which I don't really even want Perlini back all that much, to be honest with you. He had one little nice stretch last year. Other than that, didn't do all that much, but whatever. The Blackhawks have really built some forward depth on this team, which is good, but I think a lot of people are disappointed that they haven't done more to the defense. They've added Mata, they've added DeHaan, who are both guys that I think are not as bad as some as people say. Mata had a really bad year last year, but before that, he was a pretty solid defenseman. I think maybe a change of scenery could do some good. I think DeHaan will at least be a guy that can be a veteran guy and not be worse than what you had, hopefully. Pray to God, because your defense last year was awful. You're still stuck with Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith, and it still sucks talking about them in such a negative light because of how many good years they had with the Chicago Blackhawks and how important they were to those championships. But again, those days are long behind, and they're old players with lots of miles on them. If you can shift things around and have them playing less minutes per night and they're a bit fresher, I think they could be more effective again. Can they do that? We'll see. I think they have to figure out a way, because the defense it has to be better. If you have a fully healthy Corey Crawford and Robin Leonard splitting time, then that will be a nice boost for you as it is. But still, you don't want to be hanging out those two guys to dry, making 45 saves a night. I mean, we've seen that way too often the past several years. So that's going to be something to really work at, and I don't know if they've done enough to address it. The way I see the defense is they've improved it. It's still not good. I just want it to be adequate. I don't even know if it's that good. I just say it's better than it was before, which really is not saying much. But it can't be worse than it was last year if everyone is healthy. You can't tell me that DeHaan and Mata, even if they aren't that stellar, aren't improvements over what you had as defensive depth last year. Now, the trade that sent away Joka Harju obviously comes with a controversy, and you could probably argue that that made things worse by not having him. But, like we've said before, if he was spending all that time in Rockford, then they clearly saw something they either didn't like or they just didn't have the faith in him that maybe some other people had. Could be either or, could be both. So the rumblings were that they were kind of losing faith in him. But I think in terms of veteran assets, you've at least made a little bit of an improvement. Again, it's not good, but it's got to be better than last year. You at least hope. The other thing I wanted to mention about the Blackhawks is that they've been doing their prospect camp, their training camp for prospects where they can play and you kind of see the skill sets they have, just scrimmages on the ice, basically. If you're a Blackhawks fan and you want to get excited about Kirby Dach, go online. Scott Powers posted some stuff on him. Read his stuff on The Athletic. See some of the videos. This kid is legit. This kid is legit. He can move. His finesse with the puck is beautiful. He is very, very strong. It is so exciting that he is going to be part of this system. I know it's disappointing that we didn't get the defenseman we all wanted. I get it. Colorado may have struck a gold there. But I think there is a reason that they chose Kirby Dach. He's very talented. We have to see him against NHL players, but hey, the skill set looks great already. And you got to give it to Stan Bowman, as much as you want to gripe with him, and believe me, he does deserve some criticism, to say the least, but he's been very good at identifying forward talent. I mean, you saw last year when he got Dylan Strome for Nick Schmaltz. When Nick Schmaltz didn't fit here and he wasn't producing, I don't think anybody saw Strome produce like the way he did. He got Alex DeBrincat in the second round, and look what he's done. A 40-plus goal scorer. Kid's got just an unbelievable amount of talent. So you hope that he can really work out well. Kirby Dach can. I think that they may have struck gold here, even if it was not addressing your biggest need. The Hawks are filled with centers, but when Kirby Dach is ready to play, he is going to be on the team. You have to make room for your third overall pick, and that could be sooner than we think. There's been a lot of debate over whether or not he was ready for the NHL this year. I think time is going to tell. We'll see a lot more of him in preseason camp. He's probably going to be one of the guys that a lot of media is going to be paying attention to. You know Patrick Kane's going to be Patrick Kane. You know all those veterans and who they are, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Kirby Dach. And if he impresses early, you never know what's going to happen. Will he be sent to Rockford? Will he be sent somewhere else? Will he be on the Blackhawks? That will be determined, but I don't think we're going to be waiting very long to see Kirby Dach play in a Blackhawks sweater. There's also a lot of optimism around Adam Boqvist, who is another very important prospect on this team. Defenseman that I think a lot of people are really excited to see, just for the fact that we need some good defensemen. But like the Kirby Dach reels, you could find those on Twitter. People have posted that, and you see some promising things there as well. And another guy that you may see sooner than later on the Blackhawks roster, I think the front office is pretty high on him. I mean, maybe one of the reasons they decided to trade Joka Harju is that they felt like there was too much traffic on the team right now, potentially, and that they needed to get rid of someone, and that Joka Harju was not as high on the list on their priority, or at least guys that are valuable to them, maybe as much as Adam Boqvist is. There's a lot of optimism surrounding Adam Boqvist, so, I mean, that could have something to do with it. I don't know. But he's another guy that people are going to be keeping a close eye on. Again, watch the videos online. You can see the footage for yourself, but I think there's another promising piece right there. Now, I know there's been some injury concerns, but I think when healthy, the kid's got a lot of talent, and he'll be a positive impact on this Blackhawks team. But that's really all I had for the Blackhawks right now. Other than that trade, not much has happened recently. All the other moves have been happening in previous weeks. We talked about that on previous shows. Not sure if there's going to be any other big moves being made by Stan Bowman. You never know, but I feel like there may be one more move in the works, or something will happen at some point. It's probably not going to be a blockbuster by any means, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe one more move, even if it's not very big, if it's something just very minor. I think the Blackhawks forwards are pretty much, I wouldn't say set, because there's a lot of centers on the team, and there's going to be a lot of shuffling going on, but I mean, you know who your wingers are going to be, and you know who your goaltenders are probably going to be if everybody is healthy. I mean, that could be a big question going on, but if Crawford is healthy, you have no doubt that he is going to be playing, as well as Robin Lehner. You wouldn't sign him not to play him, but I think you have a pretty good idea who the depth chart is in terms of goalies, who are the big ones. Obviously, Crawford 1, and then Lehner 2, and then probably Colin Delia 3rd if one of them gets hurt or whatever. So, I mean, that's pretty much your pecking order right there. But let's stay within the United Center, and I want to talk a little Bulls. I don't have much to say in terms of what's going on right now. Because right now, the Bulls, to me, are a team that is looking to be competitive, but that's about it. Some people have asked, what's the chemistry of this team? How are they going to mesh together? I mean, the truth is, the Bulls have not really meshed together in terms of the core. And when I mean core, I am talking Lauri Markkanen, Zach LaVine, Wendell Carter Jr. I mean, those are your 3 young guys you're trying to build around. And they have all had injury issues and have not been on the court at the same time for much time at all. It's been very little. So we still don't really know how they play together. Over a season, we have not seen that. They've added some solid veteran pieces since last year, starting with Otto Porter, and then you had some of the additions this offseason. None of them are bad, by any means. But here we are, not in the position of getting any superstars. Again, John Paxson spoke on the radio about superstars and where they are to get superstars. And he basically said that they're not at that point yet. So, when they're not at that point yet, he's basically telling us that they were never in on any of them. Which doesn't surprise me. I mean, it really doesn't. It would be nice to know if they'd be open to the idea, because you need superstars to win. From what we gather, and he's mentioned this, it seems like the Bulls are eyeing that 2021 free agency period. That's several years away. But during that time, you are going to have a number of notable free agents. This includes Giannis. This includes LeBron James, Chris Paul, Kawhi, Blake Griffin, Paul George, Gordon Hayward, DeMar DeRozan, and so on. Anthony Davis. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be in that free agent class. Now, we all know one thing. It would be very Bulls to finally get LeBron James when he's past the 35 mark and he's not the same player he once was. Could he still be good by that time? Sure, but he's not going to be like he was in prime. I mean, look, we got Dwayne Wade when he was way past his prime. It would feel a lot like something like that. It'd be at the point where he has nothing left to prove, and he'd say, screw it, I'm going to go to Chicago. The guys you would ideally want in that free agent class would probably the biggest one would be Giannis, Kawhi Leonard. Those are probably your two biggest ones right there. I mean, Paul George is a very good player, but he's not the best of that class. I mean, Blake Griffin's going to be past his prime. Probably so is Gordon Hayward. You'll have Julius Randle, DeMar DeRozan. Can you really bank on any of these guys? Can you bank on Kawhi or Giannis coming here? I mean, personally, I see Giannis staying in Milwaukee. Now, it could all depend on money, but that would be the ideal guy, followed by Kawhi Leonard. Those would be like the two most ideal guys to get in that free agency period. You don't have the opportunity to get superstars very often, and those are essential. You need it. And John Paxson was talking a lot about tampering. How teams would go out, like the LA Lakers, who are hit with a small, like $30,000 fine for tampering if you go out and you sign a big free agent. And to woo a free agent, you kind of have to go all out. You have to really convince them to come here. It's more than just, hey, this is our team. We had Michael Jordan once. Come here. Chicago's great. You're going to need to do more than that. I mean, part of the job is trying to build a good enough core to have a player want to come here. There's more than just this being Chicago. There needs to be a reason to come here to see a potential of winning. Is this core going to be that? I really don't know. I like Lauri Markkanen. I have some concerns, but I like him. Zach LaVine looks like a good scorer. Wendell Carter Jr. has already dealt with injuries. Seems like a promising player, but we want to see him fully healthy first. The talent's there, for him at least. But when John Paxson was recently talking on the radio, and this was during the whole Russell Westbrook rumors, this is what he said. You want the superstars, you want to do what the Clippers are doing and the Lakers are doing, but we're realistic right now. We're not in that position. We hope that in a couple of years with the development of these young guys, players around the league view us as a destination point where they can win at the highest level. That's just part of the battle. That's just part of it. I mean, the whole tampering thing, I mean, you can go so many different directions on what tampering is. But look, teams will win superstars by getting players to come here first, and then I mean, look at Kawhi Leonard. To agree to get Kawhi Leonard, they had to get Paul George. I mean, they did that. You have to hire some of the personnel that would woo them here. Whether it's coaches or trainers or anyone that's affiliated with them. I know it sounds a lot like White Sox Manny Machado, but in the NBA, that kind of stuff matters to players. So there's more than just building a core, even though that is a huge part of it, probably the biggest part. There's just a lot of things that go into this. And with the track record of this team, I'm not sure how confident I am in them ending up getting that superstar. Now, obviously, the Russell Westbrook stuff, he was going to be traded. That was a whole trade deal, and he was. He was traded to the Rockets, so he wasn't a free agent, but just in terms of getting a superstar period, if you're not going to do a trade, then you're going to have to sign one or pray to God you win the lottery, which has not happened, but the lottery's pretty much out of your control. He also continued to say this. There are teams that are going to take a real shot at someone like that. You have to factor in everything. When you look at the financial aspect of a player that's 30 going out 4 years on his contract, and the amount of money that's going to be made, those things can tie your hands and put out your organization in a tough position. Well, yes, obviously, money is important. There's a lot of things that go into that, your budget, your salary cap, whatever. But unless you're trading for a superstar, you're going to have to shell out and buy somebody at some point. And that 2021 free agent period is probably going to be the determining time of this Bulls team if this rebuild truly does work. If they don't get a superstar then, I don't know when they're going to get a superstar. Because look, while I like Lauri Markkanen, I don't consider him to be a superstar. Good player, not a superstar. Maybe he develops into one. You've seen it happen with players, but right now I don't see it. I see Zach LaVine as a good scorer, but that's about it. I see Wendell Carter Jr. as a very talented player, but not a superstar. There is no superstar potential on this Bulls team. There just isn't. A bunch of good players / all-star players, it's a step below superstar, is only going to get you so far in the NBA. We don't want to see a team that goes into the playoffs every year and maybe makes it to the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference final once every while or loses in the first or second round. That's not what you're trying to build. You're trying to build something that's going to win you a championship. And tampering is a small fine to pay if you don't do anything too unorthodox. But I mean, if you go out and you try to get guys that will woo in free agents, or you do anything that's light like that that's considered tampering, and you get hit with a $50,000 fine, so what? So what? That is pennies of what that franchise has. Obviously, you don't want to do anything immoral or illegal, but you look at what the Lakers paid in their tampering charges. I mean, do you think they care about paying $50,000 because of a few personnel moves they made? No, they don't. They really, really don't. I mean, this was a really exciting NBA offseason. You saw Kawhi Leonard and Paul George go to the Clippers. You saw the trade that sent Westbrook to the Rockets. You saw the Anthony Davis trade. And you saw so many moves. And that was really fun to watch. It would be so nice if one day we can see a big deal like that happen with the Bulls. We've been on the cusp of things happening like that, but it's never actually happened. A lot of Bulls fans were optimistic about getting LeBron or Wade in 2010, and they all ended up in Miami. You can look at the Bulls' history and say, well, they never landed the big free agent, and yeah, that's true. They've ended up settling for solid, good free agents, but they've never gotten the big guy. There are numbers of factors. As much crap as I give Garpax, I don't think you could blame them for LeBron James or Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh, because it seemed like the big three was going to happen no matter what. But the thing is, you also have to look at their culture and the reputation that they have. That's not going to woo anybody here, and that, I think, is one of the biggest problems. No one wants to play for a culture that's bad. Over the years, we've seen more fights between players than playoff appearances or legit shots at titles. The last superstar they had was because they won the lottery, and that's not going to happen every year. It is a once-in-a-blue-moon thing, and you can't rely on that. So, long story short, to sum up my thoughts, that free agency time is going to make or break this rebuild. And that's basically how I feel, unless some wacky trade comes out of nowhere before then, or just something crazy happens, which is not impossible, but I think just most likely that is going to be where they seem to want to add the superstar. And, I mean, saying you're not there yet, obviously, you can understand from some perspectives, because even adding one superstar player to this Bulls team probably isn't automatically making them a championship contender. It would certainly push them in the right direction, but you would love to hear the Chicago Bulls being open to anything because of how important superstars are. So getting ahead and building something instead of playing caution may be something that you would want to see, but it's easier said than done. It really is. Next few years are going to say a lot, and that's really all I have to say about that. All right, let's wrap this show up with a little bit of Cubs talk. And when I mean a little bit of Cubs talk, I mean a good amount of Cubs talk, because there is a lot to address. Right now, as I'm recording Sunday night, as the cicadas outside are very loud, in case you cannot hear, the Cubs just went 7-2 in their opening homestand on the second half season. 7-2, you can't complain about that at all. The team overall looks re-energized. The offense has come back to life, except for today, but oh well. But there are still some issues. I know there should be a lot more positive talk, but let's just get with some of the issues first. Number one, the fundamentals still look really bad, especially the defense. I was at the game both this Saturday and last Saturday, and in both games, you saw some great plays being made in the field. The Javier Baez double play to end the game Saturday and the Javier Baez tag to get the runner in the ninth inning yesterday was phenomenal. But you know what? Javi Baez is phenomenal. But you're also seeing so many bad plays. A lot of them coming from Addison Russell. I am just so sick of that guy. Okay, he had a little bit of a nice streak at the plate. Didn't last long. The IQ is just not there. Yesterday alone, he didn't run on a wild pitch which he should have easily made to third, followed up by getting doubled off on an Almora line drive that I knew was going to be caught the second it left the bat, as did everybody else, and he was easily doubled off as he went. And then he missed several pop flies into the outfield. Luckily, he got lucky once, because the runner didn't go as it was being popped up at first, and he was able to be thrown out at second. But it was clearly another misplay. You just see a lot of that, and not just from Russell, but you see that all around. In their loss to the Reds Monday night, you saw back-to-back botched double play balls. One by Javi, one by Bodie. You're still just seeing too much of that stuff. It's got to get better. It's got to stop. I don't know what else to say. You got Martin Maldonado from the Kansas City Royals. He is one of the best defensive catchers out there and a great pitch framer. Just don't expect him to hit, because he does not have a bat at all, and in his first 3 or 4 games, whatever he's played, he doesn't have a hit, which is not really surprising. But defensively, he is a guy that just is really good at defending his position, framing pitches, and it's a welcome sight for any Cubs catcher, because since David Ross and Miguel Montero left, pitch framing has been an issue. I think defense as a whole, despite Willie's arm, has been an issue. So that at least is a nice little addition there, despite the slow bat. And Mike Montgomery is going to go to a situation that may be suited better for him. He didn't look good in his first start as a Royal, ironically, in Cleveland, but he was just never going to succeed here at this point. He didn't have a defined role. He wanted to be a starter. The numbers were not good. The value was dipping greatly. So that is why it was nice to get something in return for him, because any worse, he probably wouldn't have been worth anything. So the fact that you got a really good defensive catcher for him at this time, I think that's a good thing. And even if he starts doing well in Kansas City, he may or may not, it's not something that we should regret. It's because of the situation. I truly believe he was never going to really put it together again here in Chicago at this point. I mean, he was being used as a lefty specialist when his numbers against lefties were just gut-wrenchingly awful. There just wasn't a spot for him in the rotation. It was best for him. It was best for the Cubs to move on. So thank you, Mike Montgomery, for your World Series final out. We're forever indebted to you for that. Good luck in Kansas City. Other things. Starting pitching overall has looked really good. It's been tough on the pitchers the last few days. not today, but the few days before that. Jose Quintana's outing against the Padres was not good, but those conditions and that matchup was brutal for him. A bunch of slugging righties on a hot, windy day at Wrigley Field, and John Lester grinded out a 6-inning, 4-run performance in very unideal pitching conditions. You had another good start from John Lester against the Pirates. Kyle Hendricks gave you a really good start despite the loss today, 2 runs in 7 innings. You had Yu Darvish, man. His 2 outings at home so far in the second half, phenomenal. No runs, 12 innings combined. The strikeouts are there, the walks are not there, giving up a total of 4 hits in those 2 games. Yu Darvish has looked absolutely locked in, and you just got to pray it keeps going because he looks like the guy we signed. The fastball is in the upper 90s, and he's locating it. He's getting ahead of hitters with that fastball, and that allows him to use his nasty breaking stuff. I mean, when that all works together, it works perfectly. His stuff is great. And the stuff never looked that good even last year before he got hurt. It never looked that good. We're finally seeing it, and it's exciting. Hopefully he doesn't, run into more trouble down the road. But right now, I'm really, really enjoying watching him so far in the second half. It's only been 2 starts, but hopefully that gives him some confidence. You saw in his last batter, striking out Puig the other day, and yelling and pumping his fists. You gotta love that. I mean, he's showing more emotion than he ever had as a Cub, which isn't a huge sample size, but it's still significant. So, the starting rotation as a whole, can't complain. You gotta hope that Cole Hamels comes back healthy soon, because he's very important in this rotation. He's probably been the most consistent starter in this rotation, but it sounds like he is moving forward with getting healthy again, so, that's a good sign. Bullpen has been very up and down, but hey, overall they've gotten the job done. Pedro Strop has been struggling, and he's been getting a lot of crap for it, but you know what? He's been consistently putting up 2.8 ERAs the past several years. We haven't had a reliever like that, period. There's not many of them who've gone on a run like that. Unfortunately for him, age is catching up to him, and he's had a number of injuries. I think that is why we're seeing the struggles. The home run ball has been a major issue for him. He gave up that home run to Starling Marte, and then that guy, Naylor, on the Padres, whatever his name was, that tied the game late. Obviously, the Cubs won both those games, but still, it just hasn't been a pretty year for Pedro Strop overall. I just think that Father Time and injuries are catching up to him, and there have been talks about extensions, but if it keeps continuing and you see more concerning things with him, maybe you think twice about it and you say, hey, thank you for all those good years, but, maybe you're not exactly where you once were, so we may or may not move on. But Pedro Strop gets no hate from me. At least Craig Kimbrell is getting the job done. His stuff didn't look great yesterday, but the day before. And he was pitching in his 3rd straight day, so he did get the save yesterday, even though no strikeouts and it wasn't necessarily pretty with 2 walks. The command is still a little bit of an issue, but, the stuff overall looks good. In his save on Friday, he struck out the side, and it looked filthy. The curveball was filthy. The fastball was filthy. You see why he's so good. And even when he hasn't had his best stuff, he has still gotten the saves. So, hats off to Craig Kimbrell there. Brandon Kinsler had the one little bad outing against the Reds, but overall, he's done his job. You've seen Steve Cishek work his butt off and continue to get the job done. You gotta be happy there. Carl Edwards Jr. came back today, and it was disastrous. And Joe Madden putting him in that situation was not a good idea in general, because we've seen him come in to sloppy innings where there's guys on base and it gets worse, and that's what happened today. He gave up, I think it was 3 runs, and put the game pretty much out of reach. It was ugly. The velocity was not there. It was low 90s for a guy who's usually mid-upper 90s. So that was a little bit of a concern. It was his first game back, but not a good situation to come in. And he was doing really good before his injury, which stinks, but I don't know what he's going to be like going forward. If you just can't trust him, I think that in the near future, you got to say, we got to move on. Because if he's a constant question mark, you don't really want that in the postseason. If he can turn it around and get back to dominating, then great. But I don't want to wait around and keep seeing disastrous outing after disastrous outing, seeing if it all works out. I mean, it's been a crazy year. He came up with the club, obviously, was awful, was sent down, came back, was looking really good again, and then he got hurt. So it's been very up and down. This next month or two, I think, is the final test for Carl Edwards Jr. If you can offer us something, show it. Or else, it may just be time to move on. We've seen how good he can be. He has gone through stretches where he has been phenomenal. But then you see the walks, and then you see the meltdowns, and it makes you wonder. So we'll see how that all develops. Last thing I really have for the Cubs is we have the trade deadline coming up, and there have been a number of rumors of the Cubs being linked to a couple of guys. Will Smith has been brought up. Whit Merrifield has been brought up. We've talked about him on a number of occasions on this show. But the rumors are really swirling around the Tigers and Nicholas Castellanos. And Nick Castellanos may not seem like a big name, but he has absolutely crushed lefties this year. And batting against lefties is something the Cubs have really struggled with this year. Nick Castellanos, also in addition to that, has, I think it's 34 doubles on the season. And he hit a walk-off home run today. So I'm looking at the numbers now. Yeah, he came in today leading the league with 33. He hit his 34th today. He's overall slashing 280, 339, 467. And keep in mind, this is coming into today's game where he hit a double and a walk-off home run. So the numbers are probably slightly better at this point. He's got 11 home runs now. You get the idea, though. He's not a good defender. I know there have been a lot of people worried about his defense. But you got to plug some holes in that lineup because there are still major holes in this lineup. Albert Almora has been struggling so badly at the plate. I think he has like one hit in his last 8 games or something, and not a lot. He also had that really bad not running to first on strike 3 wild pitch the other night and still ended up starting as the leadoff man the next day. I feel for him because he seems like a really good dude and he's a very good defender. I just don't want to see him in the lineup every day or rarely. I want to see Albert Almora coming in as a late defensive guy. That's where I want to see him right now. That's where his value is. But man, the bat is not there. The OBP is like in the 280s. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it at all. You need to have something better. And by the way, I'm reading his left-handed splits for Nicholas Castellanos. 377, 451, 639, 1.090 OPS. Again, that was going into today's game. So there you go. And if you got him, you would probably use him as a platoon guy. So you'd start him against lefties, you'd pinch hit him against lefties if he hadn't started, and you have him if he has good numbers against a particular pitcher. You play the matchups like that. You know, it's funny, he's only 27 years old. He's been around a good while, but he's only 27 years old. It's not like he's some older guy. Even if the defense isn't very good, I still think getting that bat is worth it. The last few years, he's put up some very productive numbers. He's had back-to-back 20-plus homer seasons. I don't really like looking at RBIs, but he had a 101 RBI season in 2017, if that means anything to you. His OPS plus this year is 111, Last year was 129. The year before that it was 112, and in 2016 it was 120. So I just think his bat in the lineup would be a nice boost because the depth has not been producing. You look at Daniel Descalso, you look at Addison Russell, you look at Albert Almora, you look at what you're having in Martin Maldonado. There's just too many black holes in this Cub lineup right now, and you can't just rely on Rizzo, Bryant, Javi, Contreras, and Schwarber driving those guys in, or Hayward for that matter. You need to have your lineup top to bottom producing if you're going to contend for a World Series. And I know, look, believe me, the defense is putrid. But if we're going to sacrifice a little outfield defense for some offense, I think they got to do it. I think it's pretty important. It seems like this potential move has a lot of rumbling behind it. So maybe there's going to be a deal done, maybe not. It could happen at any moment, or it could not. You could be listening to this and they traded for him. You could be listening to this in a week and it didn't happen. But I feel like this is a move that should be made. It really should. And not the only move. It's not the sole move. You still want to go out and get a lefty reliever. Maybe get another infielder that's reliable. But I think it would be a good fit to get Nicholas Castellanos here. So looking forward, the things we do know is that the schedule is going to get pretty tough and pretty important, I should say. More important than tough. You're going to play 3 in San Francisco. Then you got to go to St. Louis, and then you got to go to Milwaukee. And you're going to play the Milwaukee Brewers 12 more times this year. Every one of those games matters. You remember what happened last year. Despite their struggles, they're still hanging around, and they're going to be adding at the deadline. They're going to try to add some pitching, both bullpen and starting. And the Cardinals, who are traditionally not big adders at the deadline, they've been hot recently. They'll probably add some sort of reinforcement. But these games are going to be really important. There's going to be a lot of stressful games against these division guys. The Brewers and Cubs have only played each other 6 times so far. That's why we're really playing them heavily the next month or so. So a lot of important games coming up. But we'll have more on that as they come, and we'll have plenty more to Cubs talk about down the road. And with that, I think that's going to do it for this edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody for listening and bearing with me because, honestly, hosting a sports talk show alone can be very hard. It's much easier to have a sports conversation when you actually have someone to have a conversation with. I mean, hosting a solo show is basically just me expressing my thoughts, which I like doing. It's just a little more difficult when you have a longer show doing it. I like to do videos on my own that are a few minutes long. This is an hour-plus show, so it's a little harder. But again, thanks for bearing with me. Just a reminder, you can check the show out at BillSwerskiSports.com. You could see this on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Share with your friends who like Chicago sports or sports in general. Until next week, I'm Alex. Thanks for listening.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down, I wanna...